Any other business? All right, our next meeting will be January 23rd, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Anyone like to adjourn the meeting?
Madam President, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Patty Street and seconded by Janie Fletcher that we adjourn the meeting. Our program this evening will be by our most distinguished guest
Well,
and member,
here it comes.
our
I warned you, Dob. I warned you.
wonderful best man
Get ready.
of the newspaper business, Mr. Larry Hiatt.
He can hardly get up.
We need to get
I'm going to take a picture of this group before I leave because usually I take a picture of the speaker.
I'm going to take a picture of this speaker.
I don't need a picture.
He paid me to say that.
I need a lectern to be able to speak. Okay, before I start, I have to have the commercials. Like on TV, I have to give a couple of commercials.
Okay.
Number one, this evening we heard here that have these books with all this information about the deaths and the births. We're not going to have that from the people of the 2020s and the 2018s and all that. That's not going to be available to you because we no longer have it. The state of Kansas, Supreme Court, in their wisdom, decided that that was private information and could not be released to anybody for 50 or 80 or 100 years. So, is it 70?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the problem. People use that to prove how old they are for Social Security. They use it to prove how old they are for divorces and things like that, and it's just not there anymore. And I think somebody needs to say something to the state of Kansas about making that stuff available. You can't even get it. We used to go to the courthouse every week and get the marriages and get the divorces and all that kind of stuff, and that's just gone now.
Would people still be able to send it for the birth certificates?
You can't if you're not directly involved, either a son or daughter or the person, and if the person's still alive, the son and daughter can't get it.
Yeah, just like a marriage register.
There's
So it's-
too much issue with identity theft.
Yeah,
When
but that's
you
not.
have enough information about somebody, you can take over their life.
I know, but you can take over their life without doing that. And that information, births are not stopped because of information. They're stopped because of the what is it that they have in the hospital, the act? Yeah, HIPAA.
Yeah.
Okay? But 2 days after a kid's born, they get a Social Security card.
Yep.
So the government knows who they are, but nobody else does, and that's not right. Now my second commercial, it's a long time till you get to the show. My second commercial is everyone should write an obituary and have somebody know where it is.
I just told my daughter to do that.
Yeah, well, your daughter can't do it about you because she doesn't know.
I'm already writing my own thank you.
Okay. And I'm serious about this. It's a serious problem because that's the history of our county and the history of our state, history of our nation, come from those obituaries. And everybody is famous to somebody, and you need to be able to do that. And I always ask, every time I talk, I always ask that do an obituary, even if it doesn't get published, do it, because it needs to be. I know it's expensive to publish in some newspapers now, but if they can't find one that'll publish it, send it to me. I will, because I know it's a major part of the cost of a funeral now, and even the funeral homes won't do them if you don't take one of their packages. So write it down. Write down who you know and what you do and all that kind of stuff, and put it somewhere where it can be found. That's my second commercial. Or give it to Ella, and she'll put it in a book. Okay. All right.
Yeah, how are you going to do that if you're already dead?
you're already what?
Dead.
If you're already dead.
Do it before you die. That's why I'm telling you now.
That's good advice right there.
Yeah. The problem is, and I'm really serious about this, kids today do not know their grandparents' names. And you think I'm saying that, but we do these senior editions every year, and one of the questions we ask is, who are your grandparents? And they say grandma and granddad. They don't know their names. So one of the reasons I do that senior edition is for that information. So we have a little bit of lineage on everybody over a period of time, and we've gone back 10 years. We also have done that with our veterans edition. We have all that stuff about the veterans. Well, that stuff would have been gone if we didn't get it from them. So I'm not bragging about us. I'm bragging about the fact that we're trying to preserve history. And if we don't do it, all of this is for nothing, because it breaks when it ends. It breaks. Okay, I want to talk about Mr. Michael Wallis's book. And I said coming in that it reminded me in putting this together of my time in Miss Jones' class writing a book report, and I don't want it to be like that, but at least I read this, and I didn't read all those that I did book reports on. So. Okay, once upon a time in the far reaches of north central Oklahoma, not far from the Kansas border, was a ranching empire. At its zenith, it encompassed 110,000 acres. Now it's known as the Miller Brothers 101 Ranch, and it was owned by the three Miller brothers. And we've seen many stories and movies and things and handed down tales about the great cattle ranches of Texas, but none lasted as long. None were ever duplicated, and in its spectacle. None of them were ever as fabulous as the 101 Ranch, because they took not only the ranching part of it, but they took everything else. I mean, it was really something. Michael Wallis wrote this book. Michael Wallis is the guy that wrote the Mother Road about Baxter and that area, and went through there. And he's a tremendous researcher. In the back of this book is a bibliography of every single person that's mentioned in that book. Wow. And I would say that if everybody in here looked, you could probably find somebody with one of your names, or either your mother's or your father's name, in this book. They're all in there, and it's just a wonderful book. But 700 pages. Most everything I'm going to say here this evening, I've got to credit to this. I mean, I've looked up some other stuff, and I have a little bit of other things, but this is what started. Though this book is about an Oklahoma ranch, the Miller brothers made their second stop after leaving their Kentucky home in Baxter Springs, Kansas. First stop was in Newtonia, but that was just a brief stop. They didn't care much for it because they were trying to avoid the war. And they left just before the war. They left Kentucky, which was where they were. The Miller family found their new home in a thriving area, booming Baxter Springs, Kansas. In 1860, Texas cattlemen drove thousands of longhorns to the fine pasture land around Baxter Springs. Especially large drives in 1867 and 1868 boomed the town. When the railroad was built in 1870, Baxter Springs became a wide open cow town and shipping point, with most men carrying sidearms. It was a wild place, especially when the trail herds hit town. Shootings were common and hardly drew any attention. The pastures in Baxter Springs area reminded the Millers of the bluegrass country in their Kentucky home. They really felt that was as close as they could get to what they had there, and actually it was probably better. The Shawnee Trail came up from Texas in through Baxter Springs, and so they built their property. They built big stock pens, stout corrals they call them, built near what is now the center of the city of Baxter Springs. I think there was actually one where the American Bank building is, but that was actually 6 blocks from where the center of town was. The center of town was more toward the north than it is today. And they put 20,000 head of cattle in those corrals. I mean, it was a big thing. 20,000 head. Can you imagine living in Baxter Springs, the size it is today, and having 20,000 cattle right next door to you? It would be.
Do you think that was the Texas Longhorns?
Yeah, some of them were. Actually, Mr. Miller, the father of all of them, went to Texas and brought the cattle up himself. He made many trips. It took 110 days to get from southern Texas up to Baxter Springs. And he would do that a couple of times a year and make the trip, because it was kind of warm most of the time, so they weren't fighting. And they'd bring them to Baxter and put them in the corrals. Perfect setting to fatten large numbers of cattle for either where they're going to send them on east, drive them north to Kansas City. Took 110 days to make the trip, and a lot of the cattle, he would trade ham and bacon for the live cattle. He would take shipments down of packages down of bacon and ham, because they had no pork down there. And so he would take big of bacon and ham, which could be kept, didn't get bad, and he would take it down there. Well, after he was in Baxter Springs for a while, and they did quite well. They were financially well off. He leased 60,000 acres of raw grazing ground in what they call the Cherokee Outlet, which is just south of our line in Cherokee County in Oklahoma, and then it went clear out past, I can't think of the name of the town in Kansas, past Wichita, went past Wichita. And so it was that big an area that they had, and they leased it from the Indians. And he went to a powwow with the Indians, and in this book they describe how they sat in a circle, and he was in the middle, talking their language, talking about what they were going to do and how beautiful the land would be when they were through, and then they leased it to him. He let them have hunting rights, he let them do whatever they wanted, but he also had rights and could use it. And that was called the Cherokee Strip. Now, the Cherokee neutral land, they've mixed those up sometimes. As a matter of fact, in that thing on the internet, if you go in and look at the Cherokee Outlet, it'll say the Cherokee Strip and the Cherokee Strip, but they're not the same. The outlet was south in Oklahoma, and the Cherokee Strip was here.
What are you calling the neutral lands, the strip?
That's what they called it.
Okay.
I don't know why, but it was not the outlet. The outlet that he got was the area. It ran long toward western Kansas, and not very far south. It wasn't very deep. However, it did get down when he was at his peak. He had land right outside of Tulsa. So that went down that far. George Miller, the youngest of the Miller brothers, always replied when he was asked about his birth that I'm a Southern gentleman born in southern Kansas. So it was kind of they wanted to be known that they were from Kansas and Baxter, not from Kentucky, because that made it so that they couldn't do business with the Northerners because they were Southerners. And even though they weren't involved in the war at all, or tried to stay out of it. In 1880, Miller left Baxter Springs, shifting his cattle drives westward. He moved to Winfield, is a town I was trying to think of. That's the center of that property. And the Miller 101 Ranch was totally self-contained. They had grape arbors, cider mill, cannery, tannery, packing plants, poultry farms, dude ranch, wheat fields, corn fields, oat fields, all of them. Anything they could just have anything that they wanted, they did there. They had an electric power plant, they had a dude ranch, they had an ice plant, woodworking shops, all were operated, laundry and a cafe. At the general store, shoppers could buy anything from a needle to a Ford. And the stores attracted customers from as far away as 100 miles. Even though it was made for their workers, and they accepted their own money, their script, they gave script to all their workers that could be spent at any of their places, but also they would take American money too, which I guess they'd have to use to buy things to come in because they didn't want their script. Will Rogers, before his days of fame, twirled a rope and sang cowboy songs when he came calling on the ranch, people at the ranch. He was there quite regularly, along with a lot of other people. Theodore Roosevelt, William Jennings Bryan were regular visitors, and they were all part of the guests that came to visit. They had guest houses for them that were like very nice, really nice place. John D. Rockefeller, Jess Willard, General John Pershing, Edna Farber, Jack Dempsey, William Randolph Hearst, Buffalo Bill Cody, Luther Burbank. Luther Burbank came and studied their plants because they had the plants that grew there were unique in some areas, as they are everywhere. And so he took that and did a whole book on it, actually. During the first 3 decades of the 20th century, the 101 Wild West Show was known halfway around the world. It featured as many as 1,000 performers. Many of the ranch alumni became household words. Those were, it was unbelievable. For those of you who remember the 2 reel westerns, the little black and whites that they had before, well, these guys were stars on that, and they made them there. They actually made the movies at that ranch, and they had their own film crews and everything like that, and they were part of the ranch. Tom Mix, Hoot Gibson, Buck Jones, Ken Maynard, Bill Pickett were all stars of their movies, and those movies sometime are on TV now that were made there, and they had everything there. And I'm going to end with this. One more famous individual from Columbus, Kansas was part of the 101 ranch, Cadre. Anybody have any idea? Merle Evans, before joining the Ringling Brothers Circus, was the band leader for the 101 ranch.
Is that clown, Merle?
Huh?
Is that clown?
No, Merle Evans, the guy that was the band leader at Ringling Brothers for 100 years. And he was their band leader prior to going to the circus. And actually, he followed the guy that was ahead of him at the circus. He had been there before him and was kind of famous. Answer any questions I can.
Wiley Post wasn't there?
Why what?
You didn't mention Wiley Post? Was he part of that?
I don't know. I didn't see him in there. We can look in the book.
Because he hung out with guys like
Yeah.
Will Rogers.
Well, he of course he was killed with Will Rogers.
Yeah.
But
So what can you see now?
it's nothing.
There's nothing.
It was it's completely gone. Everything's completely gone. The house burned in 1939. They had 3 major ranches on there. Salt Fork, I can't think of the other 2, but they had families. The Miller families had 3, and they were quite a ways apart, but they were all operating together, and they were very close. They did have some battles, and when they started to put their Wild West show on rails and take it around like Ringling Brothers, they had a big fight over that, and it really split the family for a long time until it became successful, and then they all rejoined again. But they had their own railroad on the ranch there, had 110 box cars that they could move material out of there, and they were very successful with their farming operation beyond what they used. They grew a lot more wheat and a lot more corn than they used, so they sold it, and almost everything they touched seemed to really grow well. What else?
Bill Cody's related to me. That's why I'm so wild. Buffalo Bill Cody. Oh yeah.
They really had a lot of. This is really. I mean, I condensed You know, this is if you really have an interest, this is such a good read. It's not boring at all, and I'm not getting any commissions or anything, but I have talked to him a few times. I've been to a few places where he spoke, and he's very knowledgeable, not only about this but about Route 66. He did a really good book on that, and well known. He lives in Tulsa, well known in the area.
When was that written?
I don't know. I've had it for a long time.
Were the Millers in Oklahoma politics? Were they like the-
Not much, but they were in national politics. As a matter of fact, 1969. As a matter of fact, I was going to put that in here, and I didn't want to keep here all night. There was the only time in the United States history that they have been at war in our area, or what is it? I can't think of the word, but when we went to war with Mexico, and they trained the soldiers. Jack Pershing trained his soldiers at the 101 Ranch, and they used them in their show. They were on leave from the service, and they went down to the 101 Ranch and trained. And then when Pancho Villa attacked Columbus, New Mexico, they went down and fought, and they had all been trained in that kind of an area. And that's the first time that they used airplanes in a war, was at Columbus. I went down there a few years ago, and the only thing left is a jail. Everything else has fallen down. And it's kind of funny because they were building this new jail here at the time I was down there, and I took a picture of that jail, and it said right on it, the New Columbus Jail. Right on the jail it said that. So I took a picture of it and sent it back up to the commissioners. And they have a park down there that is cactus. All they have in it is different kinds of cactus. It's kind of a unique place.
What was the name of the show?
The what?
The name of the show they were?
The Miller Ridge 101.
101. Right.
Miller Ranch 101
Wild West Show.
Wild. It was a wild.
And-
Was it sort of modeled after Cody's show, where there were a lot of? Cause
Yeah,
I could see
interesting.
these soldiers in uniform. Being,
Cody ended there. He went to work for the Millers
Oh, okay.
at the end of his career, and he was. They kind of fought a little bit to begin with, but then they
He
became.
wasn't running it. He was like a feature.
He was
an
a yeah,
attraction.
yeah, and also they had Geronimo was one of their features, and they had a buffalo, wild buffalo that they bought that was so rare they brought it in, and the buffalo was turned loose, and then the Indians and the cowboys would chase it around the arena, and and when they had it in New York, it escaped, and they had to chase it around the city. They caught it in some little town outside of this New York City, but they just that was. Can you imagine though? 110,000 acre ranch is in itself phenomenal, and then to be able to make it grow enough to feed thousands of people, just
I
kind of.
remember that they also found oil
They had oil,
on the
Yeah.
ranch.
yeah.
That helped with their.
And they had a
careers.
refinery. They built a refinery to make it themselves so that they could make gasoline and things like that. They tried to be totally complete with everything so that they didn't have to depend on anybody for anything.
But this is about the time oil is just becoming popular. When they first,
Yeah.
it may have been a nuisance when they first encountered
Yeah.
Could be.
it. You know.
Well, you know, it's this. They started. They were in Baxter Springs right after the Civil War, 1870, 5 years after the Civil War. So this would have been after that, but the next 25 years, 30 years, they had that ranch, building that ranch until the First World War. It was over. They were still there. They had they had a real problem during the war because they couldn't travel and things like that, and it almost bankrupted them. Even though they were very successful and they did a lot of things, they were always marginal because they spent as much as they made.
Well, they're far away from the population centers if they're gonna sell anything. It all had to be transported.
Except they drew 100,000 people. I mean, people would come there. That was a vacation destination like the Ozarks.
Oh, okay.
And they would drive there, and cars were just becoming popular, and they would drive there and see their shows. I mean, they didn't even travel until the 1900s. In the 1800s, they didn't travel. They drew them there.
Yeah.
And that's where those people like, you have Tom Mix, for example, was one of their stars. When he was through, when he was making the movies, the people wanted to see him in person. Well, they'd come there to see him, and he was, he was around here. A lot of people have pictures of Tom Mix with some little kid who might be one of you,
I did it at the museum. The comics museum.
Well, there's also, I think you have a picture in the museum of the Tom Mix Club, and I think he's sitting in front of about 50 kids or so, and I think that picture's in the museum here. I'm not sure, but I think it is. I could talk all night, but I don't want to.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate it, Larry.
Now you gonna take our picture?
Take everybody's
Make sure you
picture.
get everybody over there.
No, I'm good. I've got a wide angle lens.
Just get this back part over there.
Oh, come on.
Panorama.
I have a wide angle lens, so I can get all of you. You guys aren't in it. Get over there.
Thought you was gonna get away with that, didn't you?
Larry said he wouldn't brag on himself, but I'm gonna brag on him. He always puts out a pretty good paper, and lately he's been doing it single-handedly.
I have this week, I tell you.
You're still squeezed us in.
I got it. No, I don't. I must be out of film.
Lucky
We've
us,
broken the
lucky
camera.
us.
I have more.
Oh.
I just
You're
have to
kidding
find
me.
it.
You're
Do what?
using film? You're not.
What do you call it?
No, space. It's in space.
Important to unroll that 35 millimeter.
Your SD card.
I have one at home that that takes pictures, but it also let's try it. It also is has the lenses, and the lenses will work on this one. How's that?
Good enough.
Works for me.
That's what we have all of. We were talking about what media. We have every picture that we've ever taken since I started this newspaper on those little flashcards.
SD cards.
I think that's the best answer because they seem to be improving them but not changing them.
So you know how to call up the picture you're wanting?
Well, we just throw the disc in a can and date it.
Okay.
So we have them by months. We have, and then each disc we number, so you can tell about when during the time that it was taken.
So it's,
We can find them pretty easy.
Is the quality of the photo just as good now as it was when you took it, the old ones?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So who do you?
One of the reasons is we don't use like a JPEG program and that stuff. We use I can't think of what it's called, but we use a regular program that is really high quality. It's like a 16 by 18 foot picture, every one of them. And so that's what they are on here. When we take them off and put them into the computer, they go to a JPEG and it shrinks them down. And it also denigrates the quality.
Right.
But these are the, I forget what we call them.
Who do you get a hold of to complain about them keeping those records?
Those what?
Those keeping those records that you.
The Supreme Court. By the way, right now, the Supreme Court is giving out no information about anything. Their information services operation is completely closed because their computers were hacked, and they're using that as an excuse. They will not give us, I think this is totally illegal, but you can't even find out what, where somebody is, where a prisoner is. You can't find out. Once they're in jail, and they don't tell you anything. They move them around. All that information is kept secret now because they don't have the people, and the computers are all shut down, so they have to do it by hand. And so they're just taking away more, and I don't think it'll ever come. We used to be able to find out, for example, when they fined somebody, what were the fines, and we had lists of what were the fines. Haven't been able to get those for 2 years because the computers won't produce it. Well, that's just not a really good reason. My computers will produce anything, but their court computers will not. I filed 2 complaints about it, but it didn't do any good.
So this is just a state thing, right? It's not a national thing.
State thing here, yeah, but I don't know what other states are doing. They could be doing the same thing.
They're probably the same. Kansas is not leading the way in anything.
They do in a lot of Supreme Court stuff. The Missouri papers can all get births and deaths, and we can't. And they don't give you I don't care about most of the information they give you. In Indiana, I could get copies. All I had to do was write and request. I could get copies of autopsies, and I don't think that should be out. We had a murder in our town, and I asked for a copy of the autopsy, and not only did I get that, but they sent me a whole box of stuff about. I mean, there were 6 or 7 autopsies, and it was really. I still have it. It's in my garage.
So what does the Kansas Supreme Court do? What do they say about FOIA?
They don't fall under that. They're not part of the coma or any of that. They don't have to answer to that. All the other agencies in the government do, but they don't.
The Supreme Court doesn't have to answer.
Right, and they are the ones that made the rule. That's not a law. They just made a ruling that they don't give it out.
That's crap.
But the other departments, the legislature, the different ones, they still are under.
Legislature doesn't
give out anything.
They don't have to. They don't have a coma regulations.
KDHE, they have to give out.
They
stuff?
do, yeah. If you ask, you can. Now I'll just take this. You brought it up, okay? I'm on my soapbox. Now all of our agencies, the city and the county, have found a way around the coma, and the coma is anything written, and the other one is what happens at the meetings. I mean, in secret sessions and stuff like that. Well, we can't get that. But what they've done now is all of them, if you'll notice, the county and the city both have their attorneys sitting there now during the whole meeting. Well, the reason for that, if they want to go into an executive session, all they have to do is say, we're going to go into executive session to talk with our attorney, which is one of the way. There's 3 things that you can get: attorney, client, buying property, or personnel. Those are the 3 things that they can discuss legally in an executive session. But now they've made it so that they can say to the attorney, okay, we want to go into an executive session, and we're going to talk with you about it, no matter what it is. But the law doesn't let that happen, but that's the way they've interpreted it, and you've got to sue them to get it. But that's all over the state. That's why. So you're paying for an attorney to put them into secret session. $80,000 a year. He meets 1 day a month. I mean a week, 1 day a week.
It's not the same county attorney that does other tasks
No.
for us?
This is the county counselor,
Oh, okay.
And you also have a city councilor, and that's, I don't know what she gets paid right now, but I just saw the other day that the county councilor that they just hired is $80,000 a year.
And that's their only task.
Well, they also can be a lawyer. I mean, that's all that they do for the county. Yeah. And when I first came here years ago, the county attorney was, like you said, the county attorney did it all. Now the county attorney does criminal work and the county councilor does advisory work.
Who is the county council?
Kurt Benninger or something like that. He was just appointed county attorney. Nathan Coleman gave it up. He became the prosecuting attorney for the Quapaw tribe in Oklahoma. And the county councilor is Jacob Kennard. He was the guy that was assistant to,
Jake Attorney.
yeah. And they're nice people. They're nice guys, but they've got a pretty good job. That's enough.